Disclaimer: this video contains discussions of real criminal cases and sensitive subject matter. It is created for educational and documentary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. A father of four, breathless and afraid, whispers into a phone, "I'm in the middle of a field. My truck ran out of gas. Someone's chasing me." Then silence. No footprints that made sense. No trail that stayed straight. Just an abandoned pickup on a dark Texas highway and a 38, second 911 call that sounded like a man trying to outrun the night. He was just trying to get home to his family, a 26-year-old father of four, stranded on a lonely Texas highway in the dead of night. His voice trembled through the phone as he whispered for help. "I'm in a field. Someone's chasing me." And then nothing, no trace, no goodbye, just the haunting echo of a man's final plea that would torment his loved ones for over a decade. It began as an ordinary summer evening on August 8, 2013, in San Angelo, Texas. Brandon Lawson and his longtime partner, Ladace Lofton, had spent the night like so many couples do, arguing about money, hours, and exhaustion. Brandon worked long shifts in the oil fields. Stress was constant, the kind that can sit heavy on a relationship. After the fight, Brandon decided to leave the house, cool off, and drive to his father's place in Crowley, nearly 3 hours away. He grabbed his keys, said little else, and stepped into the warm, humid night. His silver Ford F-150 rumbled down the road, headlights slicing through the black emptiness of rural Texas. The clock ticked toward midnight. Somewhere along Highway 277, about 30 miles north of San Angelo, the engine coughed and died. Brandon's truck had run out of gas. It was the kind of inconvenience that usually ends in frustration, not fear. But this night would be different. Brandon called his brother, Kyle, explaining he was stranded and needed gas. Kyle agreed to bring some and headed his way, but Brandon's tone was strange, uneasy, anxious. He said there were people chasing him, that he was hiding in a field. He didn't make sense, not in the way a man running out of gas should sound. Then at 12:50 a.m. came the 911 call. In that chilling 38-second recording, Brandon's voice is frantic. You can hear him breathing hard, words tumbling over static and fear. He says he's in the middle of a field, that his truck ran out of gas, that someone's chasing me. He mentions a car, something about going toward Abilene, and then, confusion, the line crackles, fragments cut off, and before the dispatcher can make sense of it, the call ends. That was the last time anyone heard Brandon Lawson's voice alive. Minutes later, a passing truck driver called in a report. There was an abandoned pickup parked dangerously on the highway. A Coke County deputy arrived to check it out. The truck was empty, unlocked, with no sign of struggle. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Moments later, Kyle reached the scene with a gas can. He tried calling his brother again. Brandon answered, whispering that he could see him. "I'm right here," he said, but no one could see Brandon, no movement, no shadow, no sound from the brush that lined the highway, and then silence. Every call after that went to voicemail. The sun rose over the Texas plains, illuminating an abandoned truck, a gas can, and miles of open land. But Brandon Lawson had vanished. The first search began at dawn. Law enforcement, family members, and volunteers fanned out across the rugged terrain. They combed through brush and dirt, shouted his name into the wind, and retraced every path near where the truck was found. Nothing, no footprints that led anywhere, no torn clothing, no sign of a man who had been right there just hours before. The 911 call became the anchor of the mystery. It wasn't just a call for help, it was a puzzle. People replayed it endlessly, filtering the audio, slowing it down, amplifying the words. Some heard him say, "I ran into them." Others thought it was, "I'm bleeding." Others still believed he said, "They're after me." No one could agree on the exact words, but everyone heard the same thing underneath it: terror. Brandon's family refused to give up. They organized search parties, distributed flyers, and created a Facebook page that quickly drew thousands of followers. The case caught the attention of amateur investigators and true crime enthusiasts across the country. Everyone wanted to know what happened to Brandon Lawson that night. Was he running from someone? Was he hallucinating? Did he get lost and succumb to the elements, or had something far darker happened under that vast Texas sky? Investigators considered every theory. Foul play. Brandon mentioned being chased. Could someone have attacked him after he left his truck? Accident or exposure? It was a hot August night, and the terrain was rough. Perhaps he ran blindly into the wilderness, disoriented and dehydrated, until exhaustion took over. Avoidance? Brandon had an outstanding warrant at the time. Some speculated that he hid from police when the deputy arrived, terrified of arrest, and accidentally wandered too far to find his way back. But there was no proof of any of it. Just one undeniable fact: he had vanished completely. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years. The land swallowed its secrets whole. The only evidence that remained was his truck, his phone records, and that haunting 911 call. The call that sounded like a man caught between life and death, between reality and something much darker. For nearly 9 years, the question hung in the air like a ghost: where was Brandon Lawson? The search for Brandon Lawson continued long after the first sunrise faded. What began as a desperate overnight search turned into one of Texas's most haunting modern mysteries. A story kept alive by a single phone call, an empty truck, and a family that refused to give up. Brandon's brother, Kyle, replayed the events in his mind again and again. He was sure he had heard Brandon's voice that night, just minutes before everything went silent. "I can see you," Brandon had said, but no matter where Kyle looked, he couldn't see him back. The terrain along Highway 277 was rough: dense brush, uneven ground, barbed wire fencing, and thick mesquite trees. A person could be just a few yards away and completely invisible in the dark. By morning, the Coke County Sheriff's Office took over the investigation. They searched the immediate area where the truck was found, tracing the nearby fields, creek beds, and fence lines. Nothing turned up. The deputy who'd responded that night later stated he believed Brandon might have run into the woods and gotten lost, or intentionally disappeared. But those who knew Brandon best refused to believe he would abandon his family, especially his 4 young children. As days passed, the search widened. Helicopters flew overhead. Search dogs were brought in. Volunteers walked for miles under the scorching Texas sun, scanning every patch of earth for clues. Not a single trace was found. No clothing, no wallet, no phone, no remains. It was as if Brandon had been swallowed whole by the land itself. The 911 call became the obsession of the case. Online communities dissected every second of it, trying to decode the garbled words hidden under layers of static. Some insisted they heard gunshots in the background. Others believed they heard another voice, someone else speaking faintly, possibly threatening him. Experts analyzed the recording with advanced audio software, hoping to extract clarity from chaos, but every enhancement seemed to create more questions than answers. Theories multiplied like shadows at dusk. In the years that followed, Brandon's disappearance grew into a legend, a case that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. Some said he had fallen victim to a drug deal gone wrong. Others claimed he was hallucinating that night. his fear a product of panic and exhaustion. Then there were the darker theories, the ones that whispered of someone hiding out there in the dark, watching, waiting. Someone who might have been listening to Brandon's call for help. For nearly a decade, the Lawson family lived in limbo, trapped between hope and heartbreak. Lisa, his longtime partner, tried to raise their children while searching for answers. She held on to the idea that maybe somehow he was still alive, that he had escaped, that he would call one day. Every time a new lead surfaced, she prayed it would be him. Every time the phone rang with an unknown number, her heart stopped for a moment. In 2022, 9 long years after Brandon vanished, the breakthrough finally came. A volunteer search team, members of a group dedicated to finding missing persons, returned to the very same area where the truck had been found all those years ago. The terrain was familiar to them, they'd searched it before, but this time something was different. Near a dense patch of brush and mesquite trees, less than a mile from the highway, they found what looked like human remains. Torn fragments of clothing lay tangled in the dirt, weathered by years of exposure, a boot, a piece of fabric, and then bones. Law enforcement was immediately notified. The Texas Rangers and local investigators secured the site and began the slow, painstaking process of collecting evidence. Forensic teams carefully gathered every fragment, every trace, and sent them for testing. For months, the family waited again, this time for DNA results. It was agonizing, but deep down they knew. They'd always known. On December 14, 2022, nearly 10 years after he disappeared, the news finally came. The remains were confirmed to belong to Brandon Lawson, the man whose voice had cried out in terror on that 911 call had never left the field he described. He'd been there all along, hidden by the same darkness and brush that swallowed him that night. Even with the discovery, the truth remained elusive. Investigators could not determine a clear cause of death. There was no evidence of gunfire, no clear sign of foul play. It was possible that Brandon, frightened and disoriented, had tried to flee into the wilderness, only to become lost and succumb to the elements. Others believed there was more to the story, that someone or something truly was chasing him that night, and the answers to what happened may have vanished with time. The 911 call still echoes through the years, a chilling reminder of a man's final moments, caught between confusion and terror. When you listen closely, you can hear him breathing heavily, his voice trembling, the fear palpable. Whether it was fear of another person, of being lost, or of something we'll never fully understand, it's the sound of a man realizing that help might not arrive in time. Brandon Lawson's story remains one of the most haunting cases in Texas. His disappearance reminds us of how quickly ordinary moments can twist into tragedy, and how fragile the line is between safety and danger. One moment you're driving home, the next you're stranded alone in the middle of nowhere, dialing 911 because the dark feels alive. His family finally has a grave to visit, but not the closure they hoped for. Some questions may never be answered. The land gave him back, but not the truth. What happened in those final moments remains locked inside those 38 seconds of recorded fear, the call that captured a man's last heartbeat before he was lost forever. When the DNA results finally confirmed that the remains belonged to Brandon Lawson, the world seemed to stand still for his family. For nearly 10 years they had lived in a painful limbo, half grieving, half hoping. Now that impossible question, where is he, was finally answered, but it wasn't the answer anyone had prayed for. The land had kept its secret for almost a decade, and in the end it revealed just enough to end the search, but not enough to explain the mystery. In early 2023, investigators released their findings. The remains were found less than a mile from where his truck had been discovered, hidden by the thick brush that covered miles of rugged terrain. The ground was uneven, full of dips, fencing, and deep vegetation, exactly the kind of place where a person could vanish without a trace, even if help was just minutes away. There was no evidence of gunfire, no injuries consistent with foul play. Forensic experts believed Brandon may have been disoriented, frightened, possibly under the influence of fatigue, heat, or stress. It's possible he fled into the night, convinced danger was closing in, and collapsed somewhere in the darkness. But even that explanation didn't quiet the haunting echo of his 911 call, the fear in his voice that no theory could ever rationalize away. Brandon's family held a small memorial service after the confirmation. There were no cameras, no press, just loved ones standing under a vast Texas sky that had seen both their hope and heartbreak. His father spoke softly about the kind of man Brandon had been, a hard-working young dad, someone who loved his children, who laughed easily, who sometimes made mistakes but always tried to do right by his family. His longtime partner, Ladessa, placed a folded photo beside his urn, one of Brandon smiling, holding their kids on his shoulders. It wasn't the ending she deserved, but it was the ending she finally had. For the Lawson family, closure didn't mean peace. It simply meant knowing where he was. Even now, more than a decade later, the 911 call remains one of the most chilling recordings in true crime history. When you listen closely, you can hear the confusion, the fear, the desperation of a man who feels trapped in his own nightmare, the static, the gasps for air, the fragments of sentences that never complete themselves. It's a haunting time capsule of panic and uncertainty. Audio experts have tried to clean it, interpret it, and analyze it. They've filtered frequencies, mapped sound waves, slowed it down second by second. But no matter how many times the recording is dissected, one thing remains clear. Brandon Lawson was afraid. Something or someone terrified him enough to make that desperate call in the middle of the night. Was it paranoia, or was there truly something out there in that field with him? For the rest of us, Brandon's story is more than just a mystery. It's a reminder of how fragile human life can be in the face of the unknown. A simple argument, a late night drive, an empty gas tank, small, ordinary details that should have led to nothing more than an inconvenience. Yet, somehow, they unraveled into one of the most perplexing disappearances in modern Texas history. Brandon's story reminds us that sometimes the scariest part of life isn't what we can see, it's what we can't. The spaces between the headlights, the sound of your own heartbeat when you're alone, the way silence feels when the phone goes dead and help doesn't come. Today, the area where Brandon disappeared looks ordinary again. The highway hums with traffic. The fields sway gently in the Texas wind. But for those who know the story, that stretch of Highway 277 will never feel normal. It's a place where a man's final plea for help still lingers, a whisper caught between earth and air. His family keeps his memory alive, not through fear or speculation, but through love. They've spoken about the importance of mental health, of checking on loved ones, of never assuming someone's okay just because they say they are. The Facebook community that once searched tirelessly for Brandon now serves another purpose, a space to help others still searching for their missing loved ones. Because if Brandon's story taught the world anything, it's that even one voice crying out in the dark deserves to be heard. To Brandon Lawson's family, who endured more than a decade of unanswered nights, your strength is a testament to love that never gave up. To those who helped search, who refused to let his name fade into silence, your persistence brought him home. And to everyone who listens to his story today, remember that fear doesn't always come from monsters or murderers. Sometimes it's born from confusion, isolation, and the cruel indifference of circumstance. If you ever find yourself alone in the dark, stranded, afraid, make the call and keep calling. Because sometimes the smallest light, the faintest voice, can still bring someone home. Brandon Lawson was more than a mystery. He was a father, a partner, a brother, and a son. And though the night took him, his voice, his final call for help, ensured he would never be forgotten, the road where Brandon Lawson vanished still feels different, quiet, uneasy, as if it remembered. Travelers along Highway 2, 177 between Bront and Abilene, often don't realize that the dusty shoulder they pass is the same place where a man once cried out for his life. But for those who know the story, that stretch of asphalt is sacred ground. It's where fear met mystery, and where a family's decade-long nightmare began. Even after the discovery of Brandon's remains, questions linger like ghosts. How did he end up there so close to where help had been waiting? Why did he sound so terrified on that call? And perhaps most hauntingly, what did he see in those final moments that made him believe someone was after him? The official reports offered logic. They suggested exhaustion, dehydration, panic. The idea that Brandon, confused and scared, ran into the darkness, possibly under the influence, and lost his bearings until his body gave out. To some, that explanation made sense, but to others, to his family, it didn't sit right. Brandon had called both 911 and his brother for help. He had described being chased. Those aren't the words of a man simply running from the law or losing direction. They're the words of someone trying to survive. Whatever chased him, whether real or imagined, took him away from everyone who loved him. Over the years, the story of Brandon Lawson became more than a missing person case. It became a symbol of the unknown, the terrifying edges of human fear. Podcasters, YouTubers, and investigators all revisited the 911 call, dissecting every pause, every crackle of static. Some claimed they could hear other voices, distant, distorted, maybe even mocking. Others said there were gunshots. Many argued it was just noise, interference on a bad connection in a remote area. But no matter how many theories surfaced, one thing was undeniable: that 38-second call captured something deeply human, the sound of panic, raw and real. In those seconds, we hear what happens when a person realizes help might not arrive. We hear fear without words, confusion without explanation. It's a sound that's impossible to forget once you've heard it. Brandon's disappearance also became a reflection of how fragile safety can be. One small mistake, a wrong turn, a forgotten tank of gas, and life can unravel in minutes. His family lived with that reality for years. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment their children grew up without their father. They carried the weight of not knowing. Ladies often said that uncertainty was the cruelest part. Grieving without proof feels like drowning in air. When his remains were finally identified, there was a painful relief. The truth had come home, but not the man they'd lost. In time, the family's mission shifted. The Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page that once organized searches and awareness became a platform to help others still searching for missing loved ones. Through their pain, they built purpose, reminding others that missing person cases aren't statistics. They're families waiting for a call that may never come. Brandon's case is also now used in law enforcement discussions about rural search tactics, cellular triangulation limits, and how quickly disorientation can turn fatal in rugged terrain. His story, tragic as it is, has saved lives by teaching responders to listen more closely, to look beyond the obvious and to never underestimate how deceptive darkness can be. And so, the mystery of that night endures. Was Brandon's fear born of something he imagined, or something he truly saw? Did paranoia cloud his judgment, or did danger really stand in the shadows? No one can say for certain. What's left is a single voice echoing across time, saying words that no one will ever forget. I'm in the middle of a field, someone's chasing me, then silence. That silence became the sound of heartbreak for his family, the sound of obsession for investigators, and the sound of sorrow for a nation of strangers who would come to know his name. To the Lawson family, may peace finally find you. May the answers you received, however incomplete, bring some measure of rest. To every volunteer who searched those miles of unforgiving land, who refused to stop when hope seemed gone, your courage ensured that Brandon would not remain a ghost forever. And to those listening, remember that behind every headline is a human story. Behind every mystery, a mother still waiting, a child still asking why. Brandon Lawson's voice may have been lost to the static that night, but the world heard him. His call for help became a call for awareness, compassion, and perseverance. Even now, when the wind moves across those Texas fields, it feels like he's still out there whispering through the tall grass, reminding us that life can change in an instant and that no one story should ever end in silence. There are stories that end neatly, with evidence, justice, and closure. But then there are stories like Brandon Lawson's, stories that linger, refusing to fade, because they hold too many unanswered questions and too much raw humanity to ever truly end. The night Brandon disappeared has become a legend in modern true crime. Yet behind every podcast, every theory, and every replay of that eerie 911 call is something deeper, a portrait of a man who was scared, alone, and desperately trying to find his way back home. For his family, this wasn't a mystery, it was a wound, one that never closed until time, fate, and persistence brought them back to the field where it all began. After years of searching, hope became both a blessing and a burden. The Lawsons learned how to live with silence. They learned how to parent through pain, how to hold birthdays without answers, and how to keep faith when faith itself began to crack. Every time the phone rang, there was that moment, the heartbeat of hesitation. Could this be him? Every time someone called with a new lead, they packed up and drove, chasing shadows across Texas. And still, every road led back to the same place, that lonely stretch of Highway 277, and that haunting, incomplete sentence, I'm in the middle of a field. It's a line that's now etched into the memory of anyone who's ever studied his case. When Brandon's remains were finally found and identified, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like surrender. The truth they'd begged for was also the truth they dreaded. The family had fought for 10 long years, and the ground had finally given up what it had taken. But mystery still clings to the story like fog to the hills. The official cause of death remains unknown. There were no clear signs of foul play, no visible injuries on the skeletal remains, just the endless questions that have haunted investigators since the beginning. Why was he so afraid? What, or who, did he see out there? Was it exhaustion, fear, confusion, or something far more sinister? The answers lie in the silence between those questions, where fear and the unknown intertwine. Brandon's final moments remind us that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that live inside uncertainty. Darkness plays tricks on the mind. Isolation magnifies every sound. Out there, under that vast Texas sky, with nothing but the wind and the echo of your own heartbeat, it's easy to believe you're being watched. Maybe Brandon was running from real danger. Maybe he was running from something only he could feel. Either way, the result was the same. One man lost to the night, and a family forever changed. Today, the case of Brandon Lawson stands as a powerful reminder of how fragile life can be. A single decision to leave home after a fight, a single mistake, running out of gas, a single call for help, that became the soundtrack of a mystery. Each of these moments connected like falling dominoes, leading to a tragedy that still echoes a decade later. For investigators and volunteers, the case became a lesson in perseverance and humility. It showed how easily a person can vanish in open country. It exposed the limits of technology, the imperfections of search grids, and the reality that sometimes, even when you're so close, you can still be miles away from the truth. For the public, it became a story about empathy, about listening to the terrified, believing the distressed, and never dismissing the strange. Brandon's 911 call taught the world that a cry for help doesn't need to be perfect or coherent to be real. Behind every frantic breath, there's a person who truly believes their life is in danger. And so, what remains today is legacy. Not the kind carved in stone or written in records, but the kind built by people who refused to let his story die. Volunteers who combed the wilderness year after year, online communities that kept his name alive, family members who faced sleepless nights and relentless questions, yet never gave up. Their persistence turned tragedy into awareness. Their grief became action. Their love became the force that finally brought Brandon home. Brandon's story is more than a mystery. It's a mirror. It reflects our deepest fears, being alone, being unheard, and being lost when we need help the most. But it also reflects courage. The courage of a man who tried to survive, of a brother who searched tirelessly, and of a family that carried hope through impossible years. If you ever find yourself stranded, scared, or uncertain, remember Brandon's call. Remember that help begins with a voice, even one trembling with fear. Speak, reach out, and never assume no one is listening, for somewhere out there, someone is. To Brandon Lawson, may your voice echo not in fear, but in remembrance. May your story remind us all to look out for one another, to listen when someone says, "I need help," and to never let silence have the final word.